Hello, welcome to the session today. I can see that everybody is just joining as we speak. We've just opened entry, so welcome as you come in. We'll just give everyone a minute to join us today. I can see everyone still arriving, so we'll begin the session proper in just a moment. Can still see a few people joining. We'll just allow a few seconds more and then we will kick off. So hello and welcome to this webinar today on Travel Reset, Outlook and Innovation for European Tourism in 2023. My name's Rachel Reed. I'm Director of Insight here at ETOA, for those of you that don't know me. And I'm pleased to be joined today by Caroline Bremner of Euromonitor. She is the Senior Head of Travel and Research. And our partnership with Euromonitor is new for 2023. This is our first webinar together, and I very much hope that it's the first of many. We're delighted that this partnership allows you, our members, access to Euromonitor's wealth of expertise, because it's not just travel and tourism that they cover. I think there's about 30 industries at the moment that they cover in terms of macro trends, consumer attitudes, etc. So we're really pleased to be able to benefit from the broad scope of the expertise that Caroline's bringing to us today. And welcome, Caroline. We're very much looking forward to hearing you speak in a moment. And just before we begin, do please feel free to submit any questions via the Q&A chat facility. And after Caroline's finished her presentation, we'll be able to cover off some of those questions. We will also be sending you a link to download the presentation after the event, so you can get that afterwards. So Caroline, I am delighted to welcome you, and over to you.
Thank you, Rachel, for that kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to the ETOA membership today. So as Rachel said, I'm Caroline Bremner. I'm the Senior Head of Travel Research at Euromonitor International. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Euromonitor, we are a global market research company. We're 50 years old at the moment. And basically, we have a network of 16 offices around the world. So specifically in Europe, we have our headquarters in London and a relatively new office in Düsseldorf. And we also have an office in Vilnius. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's been really critical to have a network of over 1,000 analysts spread across 100 or so countries. You know, it's really important to have people on the ground who are talking to industry and understanding what's happening at that local level. And so, you know, when I present the research to you today, you know, I'm the sort of the mouthpiece, but there's a lot of people work on travel and tourism research, and obviously we're delighted to share it with ETOA and hope that it's really useful. So for today's presentation, first of all, I'll give an overview of the European travel and tourism market. Then we'll focus on what's happening specifically in the areas of digitalization and sustainability, and that need for transformation post-pandemic for travel and tourism businesses. And equally, we have some innovation trends and some case studies, which I'm going to share with you, and then we'll do a quick wrap up. And already we've received some really interesting questions that also I'll be happy to answer along with Rachel. So when it comes to the European market overview, I mean, just taking a step back, it's actually quite important to look at the global context of travel and tourism. And travel is very much back, which, you know, for all of us, it's been a long, hard 3 years with the pandemic, you know, complete zero travel and tourism at one point. And now we're sort of, you know, 3 years into the crisis. And you can see these very, very strong growth rates. So in 2022, our travel forecast model showed that growth in inbound tourism spending was 122%. That is unbelievable. It's unheard of. You know, there really is this sort of powering back, powering forward, and, you know, the ramping up of capacity, and also enormous consumer pent-up demand, which is, you know, okay, we have some challenges which we'll talk about shortly, but the fact that this combination of pent-up demand and supply, you know, cranking up to match that is creating this very strong force in the industry. When it comes to travel and tourism in Western and Eastern Europe, so the whole of Europe together, we can see that there was that very sharp drop-off in demand in the first year of the pandemic. So inbound tourism dropped by 70%. So, you know, sitting at only 30% of its pre-crisis levels. But, you know, what we are expecting is that in terms of spending in Europe, full recovery to those 2019 levels will take place around about 2023, so this year. So we really are, you know, in a good place at the moment. There are some sectors that performed better than others. You know, all sectors declined, as you can see by this sharp V drop. But, you know, we had domestic tourism, which was, you know, the substitute for many travel trips. So consumers, you know, traveling within their own countries. And so domestic tourism only fell by 40% at the peak of the crisis. And again, you know, we also know that within Europe, we have that strong international demand. So as restrictions were rolled back, that, you know, people could travel within the whole of the EU, etc. Some sectors as well did particularly well globally, and at the Western European level, we can see that short-term rentals were the least impacted by the crisis and continue to outperform hotels as consumers, you know, seek that sort of alternative type of accommodation that offers maybe different types of locations, going beyond the city to rural and, you know, to coastal areas, and also the flexibility of the Airbnb in the short-term rental space. However, you know, I'm painting quite a rosy picture with the recovery, but as we've seen, that nothing is plain sailing, and we have the fact that we have war on the continent, the Russia-Ukraine war, and that has stoked inflation to levels that we've not seen in decades. Global inflation, you know, already extremely high. The rates that we have for Europe are 13.8% for 2022 and even 9% for 2023. So we're still facing some major challenges. When it comes to the performance of categories that are related to inbound and domestic tourism spending, it's quite interesting to see what's most popular in Europe. So guided tours, Rachel was telling me she used to be a tour guide, so it's great to see that the guided tour sector is the fastest growing 15% annually over the next 5 years from 2022 to 2027. Festivals and leisure events, this is all brand new data that we published back in August. So, you know, the experiential side of the in-destination activities. And interesting to see that duty-free shopping as well is particularly popular with inbound and domestic visitors to Europe. When it comes to our, you know, digital and sustainable transformation, what we do at Euromonitor is we have an industry survey where we ask industry and travel professionals, what are your priorities? And so in terms of strategic priorities for the next 3 to 5 years, by far the most important area of focus is improving the customer journey and the user experience. So making it much more seamless, consumer-centric, equally embracing areas such as personalization. And of course, technology is integrated into that to deliver that seamlessness and consumer centricity. So as I say, this is a survey where we go out and talk to industry. And, when it comes to, for example, the usage of mobile technology, because we know that mobile travel sales are the catalyst for growth in the industry. We saw this huge jump in digitalization during the pandemic. You're looking at, say, 5 years worth of growth in a single year at the height of the pandemic. So this move towards mobile travel sales within the broader online travel sales. So when we asked industry about, how do their consumers and customers use mobile apps, well, the majority are saying that 45% of travel companies say that they do use it. They do provide an app for their customers to manage their trip. But for me, that 45%, yes, it's relatively high, but it could be higher, considering that mobile travel sales are the growth driver behind a lot of the increased sales that we're seeing in the industry. Equally, we asked businesses, what types of technology are going to be the most important over the long term? And 44% said that augmented reality and virtual reality are going to be the most important. So already, these areas using the latest technology to, allow consumers to try before they buy. Virtual experiences were all the rage during the pandemic, but equally, we continue to see that these new types of technologies are where consumers are going to find out more information about their hotel or their destination. Equally, we can see the use of artificial intelligence, 32%, so almost a third, investing in AI. And again, that helps to drive much more personalized marketing, drive efficiencies, etc. on the operations side. When it comes to the most important features for mobile apps, for travel businesses, they said that their customers prioritize, first of all, mobile check-in. And so again, that's what we were talking about with the seamless customer journey. Instant booking, that accounted for 54% of the travel professionals who were respondents. And of course, in a COVID era, we need to have real-time updates, and this kind of wraparound customer service is so important to ensure that consumers have that support across the different stages of the trip, before, during, and after. And there we'll also see the use of AI, such as chatbots, along with, standard customer service delivery. Again, looking specifically at the types of technology that travel businesses are implementing to drive this digitalization post-pandemic. This is us again speaking to industry and asking them where their technology priorities are. The number one area, and has been for the last couple of years, is the importance of big data and analytics. So even more travel businesses are investing in that in 2022, almost 70%. Again, we see that use of artificial intelligence. We see an increased use of, things like QR codes, driven by the pandemic for, when you're in destination. So all these different types of technologies all help towards that seamless customer experience. We have some really interesting data as well on the metaverse, and I wanted to draw your attention to this. So globally, 50% of millennials, so half of the millennials that we spoke to in our global consumer survey, where we talked to 40,000 people, so 50%, which is a huge amount, are already interested in entering the metaverse to have virtual immersive experiences. So that could be like going to a virtual concert or a virtual sporting event. And it shows that the metaverse is already here and very much resonating with younger generations. Specifically in Europe, 30% of consumers already are extremely to moderately interested in wearing a virtual reality headset to explore a destination, and a similar level for exploring a hotel room before they travel. So you can see that the suite of technology tools available to travel brands and destinations is broadening and is moving along with the metaverse itself. The other area I wanted to focus on was or is sustainability. Of course, sustainability is a fundamental priority to ETOA and its members, and equally to the success and the resilience of the sector. One of the questions that I get asked a lot by our clients is, well, you talk about sustainability, there's always a lot of talk about it, but will consumers actually pay more for it? And so when we asked the industry professionals, they basically 57% of them said that yes, their customers would be willing to pay more. The majority would pay 5% more or 10% more, not many keen to pay over 20% more. And that compares to only 25% that said their customers wouldn't pay more. Equally, we see that consumers are very interested in supporting local economies. So it's not just the environmental piece of the puzzle that's important, it's also that social piece. So, you know, the supporting local communities, and of course, that means that the value of tourism translates really well, one with the communities themselves. They see the benefits of tourism, they can reap the rewards from increased opportunities and job creation, but equally for the travelers, they then can enjoy a much more authentic and, you know, locally steeped experience in that destination, with the knowledge that, you know, they're doing something with a positive impact. And I was mentioning to Rachel and Sophie previously that we actually have some new data coming online in March, where we're going to ask consumers directly, will you pay more for sustainable travel? And if so, how much? So again, this is the type of information that we will be sharing with ETOA and making sure that you have access to that. So again, you know, talking about sustainability in the spotlight, 2/3 of European consumers, so that's part of our 40,000 consumer survey that we have, are already concerned about climate emergency and the fact that they want to have a positive impact on the planet in their daily actions. And equally, we can see some of the trends that we had pre-pandemic, such as the flight shaming sort of trend. You know, consumers are continuing to look and see if they can have, you know, alternative, less carbon intensive ways of traveling. So 27% of travel businesses say their customers are, you know, shunning air travel and looking at alternative routes and means of traveling. Again, when we spoke to business, we asked them, you know, where are you putting your priorities in terms of sustainable development? And the blueprint for that, of course, there are so many resources, but a key resource is the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And interestingly, for Western European businesses, gender equality, so SDG 5, that accounted for the largest amount of respondents. It was really very reassuring as well to see that 61% of travel businesses are already engaged with the SDG agenda. So that's really high. It's like the highest out of all the regions that we have. And interestingly as well, Europe rates the highest in terms of tracking carbon emissions by travel businesses, so 36%. But then there's this disconnect, so 60% saying they're engaged with the UN sustainability agenda, but only 36% tracking their carbon emissions. So, and then only 24% actually sharing a carbon tracking tool with their consumers. So you can see that there still is a fair bit of work to be done. And I was also slightly disappointed to see that the biodiversity areas of life below water, so SDG 14, and life on land, SDG 15, ranked quite low in terms of how important it was to travel businesses. So I know it's a very challenging area, but again, important to draw attention to some of these disconnects. So when it comes to Europe and digital and sustainable transformation, the challenges that we're facing with rising costs, obviously fuel, energy, and the cost of living crisis that we're experiencing, it's important to have an inclusive mindset and to be very conscious that yes, there is consumer pent-up demand, but we need to ensure that we're providing affordable ways to ensure and enable sustainable travel. And thinking about how to be much more consumer-centric, providing, for example, alternative means of payments, such as flexibility in terms of installments, buy now, pay later, we're seeing is quite popular. And obviously the importance of having flexible cancellation policies. There is this ongoing digitalization in the industry. We know it's been going on for decades, and we're now moving into the metaverse, which is exciting, but scary at the same time. So new types of technology can be leveraged, such as AR and VR. And of course, with this very much the Green Deal driving the importance of sustainability in Europe, the importance of the triple bottom line, so people, planet, and profit, but equally, how do we drive awareness with consumers? And already the likes of Google, Booking, Skyscanner, all those guys that are working with Travelist are, drawing attention and saying, this is the carbon impact of your trip or your flight, and giving people that information and being really transparent about the impact, which is a really interesting step that we're seeing. So when it comes to innovation, we have the new innovation white paper that we launched at World Travel Market. And there we actually see that as a response to the pandemic, innovation is a way of navigating the uncertainties. And so not feeling blindsided by COVID, not feeling blindsided by the new challenges of the cost of living crisis, but focusing on these key pillars of sustainability, digital, seamlessness, consumer centricity. And 44% of the travel businesses and professionals that we spoke to said that they're looking at innovation, whether it's growth opportunities, so new target segments, new product development, new source market diversification, especially with the the removal of the Russian and Chinese outbound markets for the relative reasons of war, and also the zero COVID policy that China has recently removed. So again, there are some opportunities in diversification, opportunities in mergers and acquisitions, and of course always looking at new ways to drive sustainability and digitalization. I have some case studies here. This is Goodwings from Denmark. They are a B Corp certified corporation, and they provide a platform for business travel, so enabling their clients to drive their carbon footprint down by 85%. So it's an interesting case study. The fact that they're promoting net zero is really, like one step further than, a lot of people are doing already. And of course, we know that B Corp is an interesting business model, and many players are looking at this, as well as going one step further, such as, the science-based carbon initiatives as well. I think it's quite interesting when you look at how they're approaching how you can pay for your carbon and pay for it to be removed by assessing the impact of the whole of the customer journey. So not just the transport side of the trip, but equally looking at the food and the lodging. So taking that very holistic view, which is very interesting. Equally, here in Scotland, we have a really sort of buzzing digital tech community. And so Whereverly was just one of the many players that we're seeing embracing the very latest technology, whether it's artificial intelligence, 3D imaging, Internet of Things, augmented reality. And so it just seems like they offer this suite of tools, which is, really important to help destinations and, create products with consumers. So this co-creation element, so the communities being part and parcel of that co-creation process. They've been working with the North Coast 500, for example. And again, the fact that it's all based on the latest technology means that they can leverage the analytics and really help in the fight against over-tourism, which is absolutely critical for any destination. We have a brand new report that we recently published on the bleisure or blended travel opportunity. Again, there's a lot of talk in the industry about bleisure. It's more than what it was pre-pandemic. It's taken on a new emphasis because of the pandemic and people suddenly working remotely, new types of contracts with employers. We're seeing, wellness and travel very much being integrated into the offer that employers provide to their staff. So offering corporate retreats, for example, work from anywhere policies, workations offered by operators, and the whole sort of, work from home sort of piece helps create demand, local demand as well, for travel and tourism experiences locally. So we took a stab at how much bleisure is worth to the global travel and tourism economy. And, we reckon it's about 150 billion so far, with the potential to rise to 350 billion. So it is a really important part of the travel industry going forward. And of course, I'd be happy to discuss bleisure in more detail, maybe at another opportunity. So just to wrap up today's presentation before we get into the Q&A, from the data we have at Euromonitor with our travel forecast model, where we're keeping a regular update on what's happening in the industry, updating our data quarterly, we are feeling cautiously optimistic, although there are some major threats ahead. When it comes to the European economy, we can see that it's potentially on the verge of recession. Countries such as Germany, Italy, and also the UK are going to be in recession in 2023. And the hope is that it will be like a shallow recession with recovery by 2024. We know that the cost of living crisis peaked in 2022 in terms of inflation, but inflation will continue to remain high going into 23, coming down furthermore in 2024. But with these challenges, we can see that taking an innovative mindset, embracing digitalization and sustainability, consumer centricity, and doubling down on our key strengths and having that net zero focus is going to be a really important way of navigating through the challenges. So it does feel that, you know, the road ahead for travel in Europe, we know that change is constant. We have some big, timelines and deadlines ahead with the 2030 race to, you know, halve emissions, if not more so, and then the race to 2050 for net zero. Embracing sustainable and digital transformation should be part of this process of change and transition. We can find new revenues, new opportunities to explore, such as the metaverse. So taking a sort of, rather than being skeptical, an open-minded view to the metaverse with the, you know, the opportunities for new types of customer experiences, new ways of engaging with audiences and unlocking new benefits through NFTs, embracing blockchain, and all the opportunities that there ultimately will come from metaverse type transactions. Sustainability, we know, is so critical, and I know it's really close to your heart. This needs to be the foundation of the work that we do, and, you know, fundamental to creating a thriving, not just surviving business model. And of course, that transition to net zero, as I say, is part and parcel of that, so that we can protect the communities that we are engaging with, as well as the environment and biodiversity, which we know is all part of that circle. So I'd just like to thank ETOA, Sophie and Rachel, all the team at ETOA for inviting me here today, and looking forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Caroline. I'm somewhat exhausted after such a comprehensive look at the state of our industry. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. So much data and work goes into these things, and it's really fantastic that we've been able to see such breadth. So thank you. As you mentioned, we've got time for some questions now. So do please submit them via the Q&A chat facility if you wish, and I will pick those up, and Caroline and I can discuss them. Caroline, obviously one of the things you mentioned really high on everyone's agenda is sustainability, and those really interesting stats you had there. A lot of people have expressed interest in the facts and figures that Euromonitor can provide on sustainability. One thing that struck me, and I wondered about this, with the 57% of customers willing to pay more, which is great, hugely positive that there's that inclination there. Do you think sometimes it does depend on the type of trip and the destination they're looking at? Say, for example, a lot of our members and colleagues will deal with city destinations, and I think perhaps sometimes it is more difficult for them to find clients who are willing to pay more than, say, for example, if you are a more perhaps outdoorsy eco destination that already has a very strong link with that. And I just wondered whether you'd been able to see any differentiation in the data in terms of type of trip that people were thinking of.
I think that's a really important point, that it will differ. And again, you know, I think what we have at Euromonitor is this sort of lifestyle survey. And so we can ask consumers what their travel preferences are. And, you know, we ask them, are you interested in adventure versus city and shopping and all these kind of things? So we can carve up the data according to whether it's technically sustainability or technically mass market. But yeah, I think it's quite hard to get the level of detail that you're asking for, but the data that we have, we can do it by country, by region, by income, by gender. And actually I was looking at the split by sex, so male female split, and marginally more men were interested in ecotourism than women. So again, it's quite surprising the more that you go into the segmentation, what you find.
Yes, it really is, isn't it? I think it's absolutely fascinating, and the more that we do, the more that we will find out. Because I think as well, one thing I know we've discussed earlier about it will be really good to get an idea of the difference between intention and what people actually do. Obviously, I'm sure with your general experience of consumer research, we always know that sometimes it doesn't follow through, and it would be really good to for us to get to a point where we could see the level to which people do follow through, because I think that's a really important factor for operators when deciding what product to offer.
Yeah, so as I said, we'll have some our new lifestyle survey research coming out in March, and we're asking this new question: how much more will you pay for sustainability versus other types of travel? And so yeah, looking forward to sharing that with you. And again, we can do some nice cuts of the data, because we tend to see, for example, consumers in Latin America, 75% will say that they are interested in sustainable travel and having a positive impact on the environment. But then when it comes to North Americans, it's much lower. So, you do see these differences.
Yes, and actually, Caroline, we've got a question coming from Karen Urban, who is ETOA's treasurer, in fact, on our board of directors. So welcome to you, Karen. Really great to have you on the webinar. She was just asking a follow-up question in terms of the data you have. It's obviously quite granular when you're asking about gender, etc. Do you also have it by age group when it comes to sustainability?
Yes, yes, so we do. Yes, so we have it by age, by generation. So we can look at millennials versus Gen Z versus the baby boomers.
Oh, that's good. That'll be really interesting to see. And just to mention to everybody as well, if you are particularly interested in sustainability, our Director of Policy, Tim Fairhurst, is running another webinar on the 31st of January, covering off where we're at with regards to sustainability in the industry. So do please sign up on our website for that one if you haven't done so. It's free to attend, 31st of January. So we will be covering that in more detail then as well. Caroline, also just moving on to another topic that I was really interested to see was where you had that figure of 32% of businesses having invested in AI, which I thought was a really interesting statistic. And I was just wondering whether there were some examples of the sorts of investments that they've been making. Did they give detail as to what it was?
I mean, I'd have to double check the actual question. Usually we do give an explanation. It tends to be much more personalized marketing when it comes to sort of, yes, the types of AI, but equally it could be things like chatbots and the customer experience and automation. So, but I can check the original question for you.
Oh, it was really just a sort of wonder whether that was something they had asked, because people do often ask, where should I start with my AI investment? It's such a difficult area to kind of pick. There's so much choice. So that I just thought that would be interesting. And actually thinking around the tech side and the whole metaverse that you mentioned, I really loved your use of the phrase meet consumers where they are. Which is really interesting. It's rather like that phrase, the future arrived a while ago. The consumers are already there, and I know we had a question submitted beforehand about metaverse. I'm wondering about what the impact of it might be for travel products, in terms of is it good or bad? Because one thing, I think it's great as a sales tool. I'm looking around my hotel room, oh yes, I can picture myself there, I'm going to book a room. Versus if I'm a destination and someone goes, oh well, I've already looked around that museum, I don't think I'll pay to go in person. I do wonder whether we may end up shooting ourselves in the foot with metaverse. It would just be interesting to get your take on what its impact is.
I think we actually ask consumers, do you value real life experiences? And the other question we ask is, do you value virtual experiences? And essentially the majority of consumers, like 3/4, value real life, but actually half of the consumers value virtual experiences. And when you dig into the actual generations, it's Gen Z and millennials that really value virtual experiences. So it does feel like the future generations are, much more engaged, much more comfortable with like blended experiences. When I was looking at the metaverse report, it's not just the metaverse isn't just it isn't just online. It's also it's where you overlay the digital on the real world. So, for example, we're seeing Disney, for example, using 3D imaging when you're in the parks, and sort of it's that blending of the two, which makes it quite interesting. So I think metaverse it's ultimately the next generation of the web, and I know there's a lot of skepticism about it, and it's not really going to be fully realized until at least 2030, if not later. So it does feel like there's a long way to go, but if we don't start looking at what metaverse is and how it can help us or impact us, we could be a bit blindsided if we don't embrace it, or not even embrace it, but don't acknowledge it's there. So it does feel at the moment I can see it's very much being used for destination branding and marketing. So engaging with consumers, like Qatar Airways with their Qverse platform, you can go and experience the type of customer service and products that you'll have when you fly with them. And you're engaging with engaging with a robot or a meta-human. So it's sort of on the destination, sort of the travel branding, sort of marketing side. But then the NFTs are very interesting because they're completely going to shake up the loyalty aspect of travel. And so, unlocking real world benefits through your NFTs that can be used, you can collect them, you can trade them, you can use them as a proof of travel. There's so much potential with the NFTs. And already in Thailand, we're seeing destinations using NFTs to unlock, real world experiences. So ultimately, we will see metaverse type transactions, but we're very much a long way from that. Being in the metaverse, experiencing, say, a Disney park, and then actually buying an actual trip to Disney and then unlocking it through your NFT. We're years from that, but I would imagine it's going to come.
Yes, indeed, it's so interesting, Caroline. Such interesting ways of marketing our products now. It really is. Now, Caroline, we've had a few questions submitted beforehand and on the Q&A, really thinking around the economic environment. So, particularly recession. Have you seen any indication that people are going to want to spend less because of a recession and inflation and energy prices? And do you think that there may be any areas sort of particularly affected by the downturn in the economy? I guess is sort of, that's about 3 questions into one that I've put together from the various sources. But yeah, thinking around recession and the impact would be great.
Yes, I mean, there's definitely going to be an impact from recession. And we actually, in our forecast model, we have a stagflation scenario. So that's where, there is a global recession. There is high global inflation of like almost 10%. There's an escalation of the war in Ukraine, with NATO getting involved. So that's our scenario, and I ran that and basically would knock in a single year $25 billion off the value of travel and tourism, and over the course of 4 years it was something like 65 billion. So of course, recession, an escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, continued pressure on energy prices and energy supply is all going to feed into the ability of consumers to travel. And it will dampen demand, sadly. But as I was saying in the presentation, we just had this huge surge of pent-up demand as the restrictions rolled back and the mass vaccinations took effect. So it's all about ensuring that consumers, if they are concerned about the costs, that they have flexibility in terms of how they pay, when they pay, flexibility in terms of cancellations. You know, it's all about just becoming seeing things through their eyes. And what we may see is people delaying the actual transaction until they have clarity on, say, like in the UK, what's happening in April, you know, with the removal of the support from the government for energy prices, for energy costs, etc. So again, it feels, and you know, Michael O'Leary, I was reading, and was saying that, you know, he sees this, they've fully recovered to 2019. There's really strong pent-up demand. If anything, for him, it's about getting new aircraft to you know, to deliver what he wants to his consumers. So it does feel like that pent-up demand is there. People will prioritize travel. We know it's so important to them, but we also have to make it easier and make sure that it is a sustainable travel offer, and that we're not going into a race to the bottom with the costs and the discounts. And that's where I think it's a little bit dangerous to really focus on price. And that, again, what the operators and agents do so well is show the value for money, and, you know, really reinforce that when you're in destination, you can get these additional benefits from, you know, your operator or agent.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Caroline. I think we're just going to have time to touch on one last area before we have to wrap things up, which is, I know you mentioned it briefly there, with regards to China and long-haul markets. Obviously, very new news. China has recently opened up, and not expecting you to have data at your fingertips yet, but really just thinking about in general. We had a couple of questions around the outlook for long-haul travel, particularly in China. Now it's opened up, as you alluded to, we've got this issue of the airspace over Russia and Ukraine, which of course long-haul from the US, for example, doesn't have that problem coming into Europe. But, you know, we've got that sort of looming, and the fact that China's been closed for so long, and all the barriers that we've got for Chinese travellers. Do you have an initial take on how that might pan out and what Chinese travellers might do in the next year or two?
Yeah, so we have a great team in Asia. So we've got our team in Shanghai, and we've got our team in Hong Kong and Japan, all sort of looking at what's happening in the Asia Pacific region, besides, you know, Singapore. And, you know, we actually published an article on our blog last week about, you know, the potential for China outbound. So we really feel that it's going to take off again, and now that the zero COVID policy has been removed. However, because of this sort of tit for tat, you know, the new restrictions imposed on Chinese travelers, that will be off-putting in the sort of short term. So we're not expecting a massive outflow from China immediately. So it feels like it won't be for Chinese New Year that we see that surge in demand. It's more likely going to be in Golden Week, where we see later on in the year, so say by October, that things will really pick up. And I think as it's always been with China, it's that long-term potential, just, you know, the sheer strength of that source market, and obviously clear interest in visiting the likes of Europe. But equally, you know, we've got the whole of Asia that is very much slow off the bat in terms of opening up. And so Asia is cranking up now, and China will be a little bit behind that, but it definitely will come. And in the short term, it's more that transatlantic sort of market that you were talking about, with the strong dollar, that will keep things, you know, buoyant for Europe in the short term.
Absolutely. I think it's always a bit of a dichotomy when one is based in the travel industry and lives in the UK, because you never know if the strong and weak pound is ever a good or a bad thing. You know, it's great for our industry, less good for ourselves. So yes, absolutely. Caroline, this has been absolutely fantastic. What a broad range we've covered. I feel we need another 3 or 4 webinars to go into all the day. Just before we wrap up, I would like to remind you all that if you are interested in data and reports, do go along to our Insight Hub, which is etoa.org/insight. You can find lots of different reports on there by category. We've just put Euromonitor's most recent one on there, the top 100 city destinations, so you can see the summary on there with the charts, etc. And then there's a link should you wish to purchase the full report, but there's a very chunky summary on there which is really useful if you would like to have a look at that on the Insight Hub. As I mentioned, we'll send you a link out to download Caroline's presentation as well. So it remains to thank you so very much, Caroline. Really great to have you along, and we hope that you can join us again soon. So thank you, Caroline.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. And I wish you all a very pleasant day. Thank you.
Thank you.